right, everyone, we will reconvene this meeting of the May 18th Economic Standing Policy Committee. I would like to begin with the city's acknowledgement statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Could I please have, we have the adoption of the agenda. Oh, could I have you do the roll call?
Thank you, Chair Schmidt-Rempel. Councillor Campbell.
Present.
Councillor Carlson.
Present.
Councillor Dodick.
Present.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Present.
Palladino.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Here.
Acting Mayor Crowson.
Present.
Mayor Hagan. He's absent. And Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel.
Here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Could I trust everybody's had an opportunity to take a look at the agenda. Madam City Clerk, do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are no additions or deletions or amendments to the agenda today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I please have a motion, be it resolved that the agenda of, Councillor Campbell, we have a motion here, be it resolved that the agenda of the Economic Standing Policy Committee meeting on May 18th be adopted as presented.
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Thank you very much. Councillor Parker, I have a motion here. Be it resolved that the minutes of the Economic Standing Policy Committee meeting held on Wednesday, April 13th be approved and the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. Councillor Parker.
If there's no changes to the minutes, I would just call the question and ask for their approval.
Question's been called. All in favor? Thank you very much. Now moving on to presentations. Item 5.1, Mike Warkentin, Chief Executive Officer, Lethbridge and District Exhibition Lethbridge and District Exhibition Report. Mr. Warkentin.
Thank you very much for having us here today. You'll remember in the summer of 2020, actually, as part of the resolution on the grant funding of the $25 million for the new Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center, we come and give an annual financial update. And so we moved this from August up into the year so that we're better representing our fiscal year, which ends in October, and we close with our audited statements at our AGM in early February. And so if you could, please. One more, actually, sorry. Really, 2021 was another major, heavily influenced year by COVID-19 and the impacts that had on mass gatherings. Our revenue of $3.75 million, approximately a 9% decrease from 2020 year over year. And so the main point of that decrease in 2020, prior to the pandemic hitting and the restrictions coming on the majority of our business, we were able to do Ag Expo. We weren't able to do that in its full capacity in 2021, so we saw a major decrease. And then obviously we saw a significant 25% plus decrease over the 5-year average. Our expense, sorry, before I jump on to the expenses, our revenues also saw a lot of stops and starts in our COVID restrictions, where we were allowed to do events with limited capacities, and then we opened right up for the summer and we were able to do much more. But it was an inconsistent year for revenue growth for our organization. Our expenses, 3.43, 14.3% decrease over 2020. The majority of this was managed through our human resources and significant cost cutting to our operation on Park. And there you see a 27% decrease over the 5-year average. At the recommendation of our board, we moved significantly into a cost-cutting mode in early 2020, following the closure from the pandemic, and maintained that into 2021. It was only late in fiscal 2021 when we started to ramp up for the eventual opening of the Agri-Food Hub, which we'll talk about here in a second. So our EBITDA, our cash position, our cash flow position at the end of fiscal 2021 was approximately $174,000. So down year over year, and down again over the 5-year average, which, as I've stated previously in these chambers, is approximately 335,000 on a 3-year average pre-COVID. The one kind of bright spot that we saw is we saw 90,000 people return to our signature events, most of which were through our farmers market. We set record number of people through our farmers market last year at nearly $54,000. We saw a significant, nearly 100% jump in this in 2021 from 2020. Whoop Up Days exceptionally strong, led by the free admission. So we had a lot of people come to the park and show that they want to participate in the activities that we're doing at the park. However, we weren't able to do it in our full financial opportunity. And then the 90,000 to our signature events is a decrease of about 6% to our pre-pandemic levels. And so we are looking to grow those in our multi-year business plan that we've presented to council. The one last thing we wanted to showcase, our year was really a story of the grant subsidies. I talk about it being a year that was up and down from a stop and start perspective. We survived on the basis of the subsidies that were provided really in the past 2 years, significantly in 2021. And so even from 2020, we saw a 19.4% increase over 2020, largely in part because I think we converted our controller into being a grant finder. He wrote more grants in 2021 for every possible opportunity that we qualified for, really at every opportunity that we could. And our grant funding of $1.19 million is nearly 100% increase over our 5-year average. So the majority of which is the CEWS funding, as well as some additional Travel Alberta funding that we were able to qualify for, and some smaller federal government programs that we were also able to qualify for. But that is, if you could, please, sorry. Do I not have another slide? That's it? Oh, okay. That's all I have. So thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Workington. Do we have any questions from members of council? All right. I do have a couple of questions, Mr. Workington. Certainly recognizing the importance of this project to our community and how it is key to our economic development and recovery. Looking forward to events coming up in the years, what does a full calendar look like for Exhibition Park?
Sorry, in terms of number of bodies, revenue?
In terms of number of events.
Number of events on a full calendar pre-COVID was over 400 annual events. We actually anticipate that number growing significantly with the opening of the new facility in 2023. And that's actually why I wanted to indicate that the people came back regardless of the challenges with the revenues in 2021. We've seen that across the industry, that people want to be back at the events, and so we do anticipate. We've really looked at that more from a number of bodies, and so on an average year pre-COVID, we did anywhere from 350 to 400,000 visits to the park. 125 approximately of those being for our signature events. We anticipate that number could get as high as 800,000 with the new building and our dedicated sales strategy in the new building.
Thank you very much.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that answers my question. Yep, certainly it does. Does anyone else have any questions at all? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Workington, for running us through the presentation. Oh, look, it's changed my empty chair. Just a curiosity, you talked about the pandemic subsidies. The majority of those were federal subsidies that came through from the federal government during the pandemic, but you only give the update up to 2021. Are those all discontinued in 2022, or are there any that are still being chased and applied for in 2022? Sorry.
No, we still actually are working, and excuse me, the name of what the CEWS program transitioned to for the hardest hit sectors. We are still qualifying for that and receiving funds. We are in a ramp down period of that now, though, as we have been able to open up and bring our business back. We've also been able to qualify for the Alberta Jobs Now program through the province. As we've ramped up our staff contingents, we've received as much as 25% subsidy for I want to say 7 of the new positions we've brought on this year as well from the province.
Okay, thank you for that. And if I can, just because I have you here, rather than an update on the organization, the project, the new exhibition, the Agri-Food Hub, can you just, I occasionally lose a golf ball on your property. I hope you're finding and selling them. But the area, it almost looks like a overland flooding mitigation area. It's sort of to the southwest end of the property. Is there development on there, or is that, as I said, just sort of a water retention or something?
So aside from being a golf ball catch for number 6 or 5, whatever that is, that is actually our storm management on the site. And so that is, because we added so much hard space, the old campground on site was the former storm management system. And so when we built the building where we did, we had to transition that. And so we have enough for a 50-year event on that site. We wanted to maintain the functionality of that site, though. So we've actually shaped that bowl like an amphitheater festival lawn. So it will have a stage, it will have accessible grading and pathways through it. So accessible means people will be able to benefit from that area as much as anyone else. As we all know, there's, knock on wood, there's very few days in a year where we need major storm management systems. So we wanted to ensure that we maintained the functionality of that and added to the amenity at Henderson Lake Park. So there's dual purpose in that, although I guess from a true engineering standpoint, it can take a 1 in 50-year event, and the other 50 years for a development permit were negotiated with administration to release into the existing system.
Thank you for that, Mr. Workington. I've been telling people it's probably stormwater management, but now I can tell them it's going to be a multi-use thing. So thank you. Appreciate that.
I'll make sure to kick the balls back.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions? All right, seeing none, I have a resolution here from Councillor Palladino. Be it resolved that the Economic Standing Policy Committee receive the report and presentation as information. Councillor Palladino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess if my colleagues have no questions or debate any further, I will call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Workington and Ms. Lance, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
We'll be moving on now to presentation 5.2. Aaron Crane, Chief Executive Officer, Tourism Lethbridge, regarding Tourism Lethbridge. Ms. Crane. And Ms. Day Chair is also joining us from Tourism Lethbridge. Thank you.
Nice to see everybody. So, presentation. Perfect. We could go to the first. So I want to thank everybody for having us here today. This is my first presentation as chair for Tourism Lethbridge. We are a destination marketing organization. We're here today because we want to be those leaders in an excellent driver team who wants to be the leaders in collaborations with the city and their development for their regional economic and tourism strategy plan. And so we are here today to kind of update you on kind of what the work that we're doing in planning that we have in place. And Tourism Lethbridge is your dynamic destination marketing organization full of experts who want to promote Lethbridge and the region as the destination. And I think everyone in this room can say that we are a destination. And part of that diverse team, I just want to recognize the board because we are a diverse group and we're representing like the marketing expertise of Lane Anderson, the Indigenous expertise of Katie Rabbit Youngpine, sports, Todd Kaufman, arts and culture, Suzanne Lint. And of course, a good governance board has Greg Norman, our lawyer, our financial oversight, Ryan Park and Mina Church, and our connection to the region, because we believe in supporting and working, collaborating with the region, Craig Robinson. So this last couple of years, we've been working on a strategic plan, and we're here today to discuss where we're going, what we've done, and where we're at. So the vision, again, to be the tourism leader in Lethbridge, showcasing our unique sense of spaces, culture, and people. And Lethbridge and region has a unique culture and a diverse and beautiful culture. And our mission is to increase visitation, Lethbridge tourism market share growth, Lethbridge economy, and showcase Lethbridge and our region across the nation. And to do that, we've developed 4 kind of pillars that we're going to be working on. One is economic growth, be that good host. We recognize that the agri-food hub is so important, and being part of the Canada's Food Premier Corridor, we have a lot to offer here, especially with our culinary scene. It's fantastic. Brand development, telling that good story, stakeholder engagement, be an ally, and organizational sustainability, do good work. And with that team that I've just acknowledged, and with our leadership with Aaron Crane, who's new to our team, we feel that we are the people to do that. As you can see, a part of the package, our priorities there and our outcomes, and we'll be looking forward to continually working with the City of Lethbridge to come to see where we're at, where we're going, and what outcomes that we have achieved. So with that, I would like to introduce Aaron to give the updates.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, councillors. I'm thrilled to be here with you today at my first council presentation. Michelle has shared a little bit about the board and about the strategic planning process. And when I first started in January, we put together this action item in order to take their vision and actually put it into action. So Janessa, if you can go to the next slide. I did include our audited financial statement from 2021 in the package. This is just a short debrief. You'll see there that in 2021, these are the audited financial numbers. And then for 2022, this is the budget that our board has approved. And you can see some of those changes. But in our pillar of doing good work, we do have on there about leveraging these funds. And this is something that we are very focused on. We do have applications into our provincial body with Travel Alberta, and also into the federal government to take advantage of the tourism relief fund that is available. So we are looking to maximize the funding that we receive from the City of Lethbridge in order to do more for more people and to bring that business back to our tourism economy. So if you can go to the next slide. It would not be a tourism presentation here today without talking about the airport. I do have the slide up here for Flair, and I just want to give a shout out to the Opportunity Lethbridge team because they've done a great job about bringing some of that opportunity here to our door. And we are looking at working with our partners around the province who also benefited from some of these flights to see how we can maximize that. I think we all know that those sun destinations are really important to residents from Lethbridge and region, but many of you know that I am an Arizonan at heart, and I do believe that our destination is just as important to them as theirs is to us. So we will be focusing on making those connections and maximizing those as much as we possibly can. Next slide. One of the things that Michelle talked about was, working in collaboration with our economic development partners. You all know that there's a good tie there with the work that I used to do with Economic Development Lethbridge. And so coming together to look at food tourism was one of the things that really drew me to this job. And when I came on board and found out that the team had already gone into collaboration with a company called Food Tourism Strategies that I was very connected with, it just seemed like, the clouds had parted and the angels had sung, and I knew it was a good fit. So we have been hosting a few of these sessions. If you can go to the next slide, Janessa. I'm not going to go through a lot of these with you because they are available in your package and online. But I do want to point out here that they had actually a 6-step process. I shared the first 4 with you because the last 2 are very actionable for the businesses who have been coming to these workshops. But on here, one of the things I do want to point out, and we know this from some of the work being done by Economic Development Lethbridge, is that food is really important to not only the residents, but the visitors. And it's one of the things they look for when they come to visit. And because we do it so well, we really need to capitalize on that. If you want to go to the next slide. You all went through some economic development training with Trevor at the beginning of the year, or actually at the end of last year, where we talk a lot about business retention and expansion, taking care of the businesses that you actually have, and investment attraction, going after new business. So when we can bring all of these people together, all of these businesses together to work with each other, to talk about food tours and sharing that information, this is one of the things that's going to help us create that business retention and expansion. To the next slide. This slide is really important to us because Travel Alberta and our federal partners always talk about high-value travelers. And this slide gives you an idea of the impacts that we can actually make. So it's divided up there into regions. And what we found out during the pandemic is that Albertans are really good about traveling around Alberta. 83% of them stayed within the province and traveled around, and that expenditure was $4.8 billion, and the average spend was $207. What we're talking about when we talk about bringing high-value travelers in, which is exactly the opportunity we have with the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center, is going after the other Canadians, the U.S. market, and the international market. And with Travel Alberta, they're really making a big push to not just count the number of people who are coming, right? That's a great stat. It's wonderful. But let's really focus in on what they're spending and making sure that they're spending that money here in our community. And you'll see the impacts of that, that if we're bringing people in, it's not just enough to get them here. We have to show them what there is to do and how to spend their money around our community. It goes back to being that good host. Next slide. The other thing that I do want to point out is that we have some work to do with our businesses locally, because it's not enough just to say, yeah, we're open to visitors. There is some work that we have to do with them. They have to activate visitors when they come, have things that they can experience and that they can do. And this is a lot of the work that we're doing through those workshops, is teaching businesses how to engage travelers to capture more of their money. It sounds like we're really money hungry, which we are, kind of. Next slide. So in June, we are, we're getting close to launching Canada's food tours, again, in alignment with Canada's Premier Food Corridor. How can we have a Canada's Premier Food Corridor without showing people all the great things that there is to see and do? So we hope to launch that in the next few weeks. And in June, we will be welcoming some social media influencers down to go on this tour. And we hope to get all of you out on this tour too, as well as, everyone in our region. These will be self-guided driving tours that are going to be available year-round. Anybody can do these tours at any given time. They can do it as easily in February as they can do it in July. And that is one of our priorities, is really capturing that year-round business. Thank you, Janessa. So those are just some of the highlights that we have going on. But one of the things that I found is that this team is really active, and it wasn't something that I was aware of before I started working at Tourism Lethbridge. And I've met with many of you one-on-one, and some of the things we've talked about is, the need to get out and tell these stories a little bit more. So while I'm here in front of the microphone, I'm going to take the opportunity and share some of the great things that we've done just in the 4 months since I've been in the role. We started out the year hosting Winterfest YQL, which was funded through the Reimagine grant through Heart of Our City. And one of the surprising things that we did was a hot chocolate contest to, again, activate some of our local cafes and get people visiting there. And again, not just visiting, but spending their money. So the hot chocolate contest, we had a few businesses that day that had to shut down at 3 o'clock because they were out of food. Not just hot chocolate, they were out of food. We had 1,300 interactions that day on our Driftscape tour application. That's a walking tour in and around the city, which was amazing. So those are the things that we're looking to expand as we go into the food. Next slide. A lot of you saw us at the Briar, where we were capturing economic impact data. You will see there that we had stations set up with iPads where we asked people to come in and fill out that information. And I will say that we have received those reports back, and we're working with the city on how to share that information with you so you'll know the return on that investment that you made for the Briar. We also did a media valuation that shows you, what the impacts were out to the broader public about Lethbridge, which is always exciting. And it was just great to see that venue so full of life and welcoming people back in. Next slide. We also partnered up with the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce and Exhibition Park on the very first local Seed to Table dinner, which was phenomenal, again, highlighting all of the local food that we produce in this area. Next slide. Again, we saw some of you at the Alberta Food and Beverage Expo. We were at that time, we had just launched, if you want to take us to the next slide, Janessa, we had just launched the Highway 3 Ale Trail, which is another one that we are pushing really hard right now, which goes hand in hand with our food tours. So this was done in collaboration with our partners out of Medicine Hat and the Crow's Nest Pass. This is, again, one of those things that Travel Alberta is really pushing, is the corridors and clusters concept. They are encouraging us to work regionally with our partners to capture more of that business, and we are more than happy to do so. Because if we're going to compete with the likes of Calgary and the likes of Edmonton, we have to partner up and have a strong Southern Alberta presence. If you take us to the next slide, we were in Calgary for the International Beer Festival. I know my job is really, really tough. But we actually spent 3 days talking to there were 40,000 people in attendance. I won't say that I talked to every single one of them, but we did come home with about 500 new additions to our newsletter from people in Calgary who are interested about coming down to Southern Alberta. We are headed up to the Edmonton Craft Beer Festival, not next weekend, but the weekend after, which we will be attending the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta's Advocacy Day, the beginning of that week, and then we'll be at the Edmonton Craft Beer Festival later in that same week. Next slide. And I know some of you have seen these, and thank you for posting them on social media. Really appreciate it. These are the billboards that you will find at the Calgary Airport in the luggage area. And we also have them stationed at the entrance to the province on both the east side and the west side. I believe Golden is one area, and over near Medicine Hat is the other. Next slide. So we're here today, again, just to make you aware of all of the things that we're doing. We wanted to share our year-end report with you, along with our financial statements. But I'm also looking, for, help and guidance and feedback, because we know that as we develop some of these tours, you're going to come across, and you may hear from businesses that say, why weren't we involved? And, our role here as the destination marketing organization for Lethbridge is really to develop these tools and help market them. We are always looking for content. And if your businesses, or if you're hearing from businesses that they want to participate, have them reach out to us and please make that connection. And again, any feedback that you have about these, we'd love to take you out. I know some of you have, been to a lot of these places before. But the other thing on here is your support, right? We do have a few funding applications in. We have been asking for letters for that. And one of the big things that we have with the food tours is educating people about our way of life here in Lethbridge. We know that we will be welcoming people from the city who may not have ever been on a farm before, who may have never driven a gravel road, who may have never encountered a cedar pulling a tank, pulling another tank on a highway, right? And those can be intimidating things. So we do want to tell those stories. And if you can help in any way on guiding us in telling those stories or identifying some of those risks that we need to mitigate, we'd greatly appreciate it. And with that, that takes me to the end of this presentation. And both Michelle and I, again, want to say thank you for the time today to come in and chat with you. And we're open for questions.
Right, I have Councillor Carlson first in the queue here. Go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Crane, Ms. Day, for the presentation, all the information, and congratulations to both of you on your roles with Tourism Lethbridge. I wish you the best of success. I'd also like to say I really appreciated seeing the strategic plan and the action plan that rolled out of it, especially to see that it's very action-oriented. I know that when Council was developing our own strategic plan, being action-oriented was top of our list. So thank you. That resonates with me quite well. Ms. Crane, you talked about I think it was $9 to $10 billion of tourism impact across the province, whether it be from our fellow Albertans or other Canadians or international tourists. Do we know what our share here in Lethbridge is of that market? Do we track that?
That's a great question. And no, there has not been tracking. Travel Alberta for a while was doing Southern Alberta tracking, which was pretty much everything south of Calgary and border to border. They did stop with that around 2017, but it is one of the things around the Travel Alberta. There is a constellation group which consists of all of the destination marketing organizations within Alberta. And we get together once a quarter, and these are the things that we're talking about. One of the asks in our funding is for a way to monitor visitor movement and to be able to track that. Travel Alberta does have an umbrella policy, but we've all been encouraged as DMOs to do our own so that we can share that information about how travelers are moving around. One of the other things that we have re-implemented that was being done through some of the work that I used to do in meetings and events when I was working at Economic Development Lethbridge is a shared calendar that tracks our events and tracks the number of out-of-town visitors that those events attract. And we do have a multiplier, an economic multiplier that we use to estimate that economic spend. So there are some of those things in the works, but it is one of the goals to be able to provide that information to you in a better and more consistent way.
And thank you, because I do appreciate that you've got some outcomes and measurables in your strategic plan and your action plan. One of those that I'd like to see is if we can measure that economic impact here, because I really appreciate when you say, yeah, it's not just the point of getting folks here. It's let's be crass. It's to get them to spend money in our community while they're here. So I'd appreciate seeing some figures around that. That'd be awesome. Something else you talk about. Well, actually, I'll take another tack. Are there any gaps or barriers that the city like council or administration could assist with. Something that jumped out at me was you talked about proper signage, wayfinding. That was something I could get my mind around of a way we could assist. Are there any other those gaps or barriers that have been identified or will be identified to bring to city council or administration and say, here's some things we need?
Thank you so much for that question, Councillor Carlson. And yes, through our food tourism strategies work, it did include 2 workshops where we had been welcoming businesses in. But the third step of that is assessments with those businesses to ensure that they are tourism ready and to identify some of those gaps. Do they have signage? Do they have proper parking? Are they accessible? Are they maximizing that tourism spend opportunity? So we are waiting for that information back, and we will share it, because I think these are conversations that then we can have with the Opportunity Lethbridge team about, you know, are there some opportunities to develop either incentives to help these businesses meet those thresholds? Or, you know, what are some of the things that we can do? Is it ongoing education? What does that look like? And elevating not only, you know, these 12 businesses that we've identified for this first food tour, but all of the businesses within the city of Lethbridge to start capitalizing on the tourism economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Dodick?
Thank you. I noticed in your draft operating budget that the Travel Alberta funding has gone from 215,000 just over in 2021 and down to 75,000 in 2022. Is that because the province has cut back funding to Travel Alberta, or there another reason, or do you know?
No, it's actually timing. The provincial government, of course, runs an April 1st to March 31st budget, so they just rolled out their newest funding, and that is what we've applied for. So what you see in there from the 75,000 was actually the split between 2021 and 2022 because of the way our finances work.
So do you anticipate the Travel Alberta funding, once it all pans out, is going to be roughly the same year to year, or at least for the foreseeable future?
Actually, I'm hoping for more for this 2022. And then we are, again, I mentioned this Constellation Group. They are working with us to try and get to some regular stabilized funding as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. This probably isn't a fair question, and I know I'm premature in asking it because you're working on getting the data, but I just wanted to, the Briar, I mean, it's such an important part of, we gave $1 million to make this happen, and you know, you're asking everyone about their experiences and if they spent money and all that, but I just, without the data, you were there with your first blush of the experiences that you saw. Can you give us a sense, was spending $1 million for the Briar, the biggest curling championship in the world, was it worth it?
Yes.
Yay, thank you. No, but if you can elaborate a little bit more.
Sure. Well, I will share with you that while we were there with our boots on the ground in that capacity, what we heard was just so many positive things about, you know, people sharing their experiences in Lethbridge and how fantastic it was. But as I mentioned, I have also actually seen those reports and look forward to sharing them with you so that you can see them too. But what we are seeing back is phenomenal. And I think it is good return on investment for your funding. And that's what we would like to share with you, not only you as the funders, but also with the entire community. So that way they can really understand the impact of these major citywide events that come into our city, because everybody needs them. And the information that we have breaks down how they're spending their money, right? You know, what's going to the hotels, what's going to the restaurants, what's going to the attractions and the entertainment, what's being used by transportation. And it shows that good overall look at the tourism economy for Lethbridge. And those are the things that we want to keep continuing and providing that information back here to you.
That's great. I look forward to the report. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Does anybody else have any questions at this time? All right, I do have a couple of questions here. Ms. Crane, you commented about some of the marketing that we've seen external of the community. I'm just wondering if you can outline for me some of the other external marketing opportunities and initiatives that Tourism Lethbridge has undertaken.
Thank you. We are working on natural resources, again, to tie in with some of that economic development work that is already being done around the Southern Alberta Alternative Energy Partnership. For those of you who don't know, our region is home to the largest solar farm in Canada and one of the largest wind farms in Canada. We've also seen major development in irrigation, and as Councillor Crowson pointed out to me, how important the soil is to our area. So these are, again, some of those stories that help differentiate us from other destinations and help us carve out that little niche for ourselves in order to do that. One of the other topics or segments that we're looking to really highlight is the Indigenous experiences. We are a day trip, if even that, a stone's throw from Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump and Riding on Stone, two amazing World Heritage sites. And if you weren't aware, Alberta has 6 UNESCO World Heritage sites, and 4 of them are within a day's trip of Lethbridge. So we are really pushing that UNESCO World Heritage Hub, that you can stay here, dine here, shop here, come to our attractions, but then also use this as a hub to go out and see other places. Oh, yes. Michelle did just remind me that the team is also headed to Rendezvous Canada next week, which is the largest sales show for all of Canada, where we'll have the opportunity to meet one-on-one with tour operators to bring them here into our area. So again, not just what we call rubber tire or FIT, the free independent traveler, but those, I know, yes, we love free travelers, but we do want those tour buses, right, to put us on their itineraries and capture that. So, sorry, Councillor Schmidt-Rempel, did that answer your question?
And those are certainly the initiatives you have going forward. What have you currently done, and what, I guess, looking back, what's in place?
So again, we are capitalizing on the Canada's food tours, right, in alignment with Canada's Premier Food Corridor, and the Ale Trail to kind of really capitalize more and bring in more of our businesses. Yeah, I'll get to that one.
I'll get Ms. Day to say that so that we can all hear it.
Here you come.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm missing your question.
We all need to be able to hear what you just said.
Well, one of a national campaign that we are currently involved in is the Year of the Garden. So the federal government has deemed it the Year of the Garden, and so gardens, including Nikiugo and all the gardens around Southern Alberta, are collaborating to ensure that everybody in Canada and in North America knows that we are a great, amazing garden hub.
Thank you very much. I see Acting Mayor Crowson in the queue.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the information. A couple of things. When I go to the best places around, when I have the best experience, it's almost as if every resident in that community is on board with tourism. They all, at the drop of a hat, can go from their everyday life to being somebody who promotes their community. I know it's early days and you're just working on this, but what are your plans to help make every resident in Lethbridge part of this? Help them become the cheerleaders for our community as part of our tourism program, or is there a plan for that?
There is definitely a plan for that. And for us, it starts with the businesses. It starts with bringing them on board and helping them see the opportunities for the tourism economy for themselves. And again, as we were talking about with the food businesses, with our local craft breweries, we're already doing that work, but expanding that out into all of the opportunities around the natural resources and the indigenous side of things, but getting everyone involved in those events that we do and capturing as much of that as we can. So we do believe that the businesses are the best way to start that out, to get that momentum going.
I know you have information here about how you're looking for assistance with education and marketing. You're asking businesses and others to create tours. A lot of them look like they will be driving tours or self-guided tours. But one of the things I note about Lethbridge, and you can challenge me on this if I'm incorrect, is we don't have a good assortment of really good tour guides. So if you are looking for guided tours, that's one of the areas that I feel we are lacking in this community. One is that, would you agree with that? And two, how do we go about creating so that we have a really good group of tour guides when we need them?
Yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. There are some gaps in our tourism industry that we definitely need to fill. Tour guides and transportation are just a few. And again, as we work on these projects and we highlight those needs, my hope, and knowing the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Lethbridge, is that I believe that there will be people who hear that call and who can pick that up and take it and run with it and say, hey, I can fill that gap, because that is exactly what our entrepreneurs do here in this community. And I have faith that they will recognize it and capitalize on it.
So as part of that, as a follow-up, what are you doing then to reach out to post-secondary and those sort of, who have the young people who could be tour guides, and to the organizations who have the content to help make those connections? Because I can tell you what breaks my heart is when you go on a tour and they give incorrect information but think they know what they're talking about. So how do we make sure that we have the right people, the right information, all put together correctly?
And that's a big part of the work that we're doing. So thank you for that question. It's, not only doing the good work, but sharing that work out with the community. Here in the gallery today, we do have Dominika Wojcik, who just started with Tourism Lethbridge as our Director of Tourism Opportunity. And that will be a big part of that role, is ensuring that we are connecting with the organizations within the community who have that information and who can help share it and ensure its accuracy, and again, champion it and help bring people on board. Those are all the things that we need to do, and working in alignment together is one of the big goals that we have. And I believe that, that is a big part of the regional economic development and tourism strategy that we're working on with the city.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, and thanks for the presentation. I look forward to the Everyone an Ambassador program being rolled out. Just a question in regards to the finances to follow up on Councillor Dodik's comment. Is the same condition in the marketing expense, is it the same as you itemized earlier on in regards to the Travel Alberta funding? Because it's substantially reduced.
The Travel Alberta funding?
Oh, the marketing expense. So
yes.
What you're expending on marketing is about 1/3 of, projected 1/3 of what you did last year. So how does that reconcile with the language that you've been providing us?
So that is exactly where a lot of the funding that we've requested to the province and to the federal government comes in. It's through those marketing programs, so that when we are successful in our bids for that fund, that's exactly where those funds go to, is into that marketing bucket. And that's primarily where those funds were spent last year.
Good, thank you. Good luck with it.
One other question that I have here is with regards to the conference tourism piece. What are your plans for that, and when do we expect to see that being implemented into the overarching plan?
We have already started with that. Again, this will be a big part of the Director of Tourism Opportunities role. Not only the MICE piece, but the sport piece and the year-round destination. Ensuring that we have a citywide proposal that can go out to RFPs when there are citywide events that are looking to be hosted here, and somebody to follow that through from start to finish, and providing that service to these event organizers. Because when you're coming into a city, you just don't know. You don't know what you need, and you don't know what you don't know. And that's what we're there for, is to help guide them and connect them. And, you know, we're not going to be able to answer all of their questions. We're not going to be able to solve all of their challenges, but to just be a resource and a place where you can go to ask the questions or even just vent. You know, those are the things that we provide and is part of being that good host. So that piece has already started. We are working very closely with Lethbridge Exhibition on their plans and how we can maximize those plans together. Same with the Lethbridge Sport Council on the sports side. So we are not doing this alone. We are doing this in alignment with some of our close partners.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from any other members of council? All right, seeing none, I have a motion here from Councillor Middleton Hope. Be it resolved that Economic Standing Policy Committee receive the report and presentation as information. Councillor Middleton Hope.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. It's very enthusiastic and very uplifting. And unless there is any further comments, concerns, debates, then we'll call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Crane and Ms. Day. All right, we are moving on now to submissions. We have submission 6.1 with regards to waste and recycling utility response to the January 18th OBM with regards to green bins. This is a submission. I call speakers, right? Because it's a submission, I just call up speakers to see if there's anybody to speak to this one. All right, we'll start with any questions that council may have with regards to this submission. Councillor Dodek.
Yes, actually, I have a number, and I'll direct it to whoever feels best able to answer it. Actually, the very first question is really quite a simplistic one, or a simple one, is I just want to know the actual process where it goes from kitchen collection right to the processing. And I'm particularly interested in, because I had different answers as to whether the kitchen catchers would have to be wrapped in paper or have compostable bags, and what the green bins will require as well. So just take me from creation of the green waste to its processing, just to the plant. I don't need to hear what happens there.
I'll just introduce all of us too, if you just at the beginning here. So Mandy Parker, General Manager of Waste and Recycling. We have James Nichols, who is the Operations Manager, and Steve Rossi, who is the Waste and Recycling Center Manager, just so that you're aware of who is speaking.
I'll take a crack at this particular one. So starting at the very beginning of the process with our phase one, 1,900 households, when they receive their green card, as well as the kitchen pail that they're given so that they can collect food waste in their household if they so choose. Right now, we are encouraging folks to use paper products to line their kitchen pail. At this point in time, we are not accepting compostable bags. When we've done a municipal scan and talked to other municipalities like Calgary, Calgary was the biggest one we talked to, but other municipalities as well, compostable bags create a few issues for us on the processing side. So at this point, you would use paper towel to line that kitchen catcher. You would then take that material from the kitchen pail, place it into the green cart as is. You can line it with a yard waste bag if you so chose, but most people just keep it empty as is, and then it's disposed of on a weekly basis.
Is there any concern, okay, so it's not compostable bags in the kitchen, but when it's out in your front or back lane or wherever it's picked up, is there any concern with respect to freezing and the fact or the possibility that the items tossed in there might just stick there? So how is that dealt with?
Yeah, there's a few ways that you can mitigate those concerns. Some municipalities we've talked to encourage residents to freeze their materials before actually placing them in the cart. Avoid placing them in the cart during the winter months as close to collection as possible to avoid freezing. In terms of other issues like grass clippings sticking to the cart, our drivers are diligent. They will shake a cart once, twice, 3 times in order to make sure the material is actually coming out of the cart. And worst case, we have technicians, if, for whatever reason that material doesn't come out, we can work with residents to deal with that as well.
So take a hot summer day, there's been a pickup. Not everything is collected into the truck that picks it up. You're going to have residual things. How do you deal with, or how do you expect citizens to deal with, for example, odor and things of that nature?
There's a few ways that residents can deal with odor concerns. They can use, vinegar water solution to, gently clean their cart on a periodic basis. We know of several companies in town, if people wanted to go to this level where they'd like to actually have their bin professionally washed, again, vinegar water solutions would keep it clean usually. Other odor controlling substances, again, if they feel they need to bag the materials using yard waste bags, that's another option as well. So a few things they can do to mitigate that.
Madam Chair, I do have a number of questions, but stop me at any time, and I'll just be at your beck and call as to when I can pop back in.
Oh, fun. Councillor Dodek, actually, I missed that we did have a submission here, and we do have somebody in the audience to speak to this.
Yeah, actually,
My apologies for that, because we should have had him come up before we started addressing questions. So at this point, I will call on, I do believe we have Ken Eichel, Mr. Eichel, in the gallery to speak to this, if you would like to come forward at this time. And my apologies for missing that in our agenda.
Got to sit down. Getting too old. Come out of retirement. Anyway, thank you very much. Before I get started, I'd like to say that all the information that we gathered in the presentations that I put in come out of city documents and also all the consultant reports, and that's what we look at. And the people that we've been talking to, we have real strong concerns about the mandatory organic program in comparison to a voluntary program with, you just have to excuse me for a minute. The commercial, ICI, that's who it is. Anyway, we would like to, as I said, we'd like to present you our concerns regarding the residential organic collection. The main concern is the accumulated debt payments. The debt payments that are on the curbside recycling, over $1.4 million that we're paying for, and tipping fees. We pay tipping fees on all the recyclables. So the same thing is coming over to the organic program that they're presenting. We're going to have debt payments. Thankfully, maybe half of them have been cut down with the government grants, but still, I think we're looking at debt payments there. But we're also looking at $1.5 million in tipping fees that we're going to have to pay on organics, and for less than 4,000 tons that we have are on organics, compared to the over 20,000 tons on the ICI, voluntary, not mandatory like we are. And That's a big concern of us. The ICI, which we found out, deposited over 20,000 tons of organic in a landfill number 7 over the last 5 years because they had a transition period of over 5 years, up to 8 years now. And it wasn't mandatory, but we're trying to figure out how and when council okayed approved that landfill number 7, and when they approved 20,000 tons of organic to be deposited in that landfill. But they're coming after us, and they wanted to dump a $23 million, now down to $17 million, probably less on cost, maybe $9 million. But they want to dump a program on us like that. But voluntarily, they gave 20,000 tons of organics to be dumped in that landfill over 7 years, 8 years now, and not mandatory. They talk about mandatory in 2001 when they put in a recycling payment that people have to pay. We had a meeting with the city manager last June, and we were talking to him in April about the term CIP E7, the term E7. What is E7? Everything that we see on the ICI is deposited and paid for out of an E7 account. We always ask the question, when did City Council approve that account? And all the questions that we had, we couldn't get. We finally had a meeting with the city manager last year, basically discussing a machine that was purchased, as I said, in the thing, a repackaging machine for $600,000, and that was purchased in December of 2020. But when we look at the ICI, we don't see any accounts. We don't see any project numbers. We don't see anything with all the work that's being done with the ICI, where we have project numbers. We have a project number on the curbside program, but we don't see. And basically, when we talked to the city manager, he said to us, when you look at a procurement document, summary document that comes to City Council doesn't approve it. And that's what we always question. Well, how come City Council doesn't say something about the spending? He said City Council doesn't approves the document as a whole, but doesn't approve individual items like the spending on this bagger machine, also another aerating machine for $700,000. And the last machine that they just bought was over $900,000, a shredder. They just purchased it in thing. We asked, where's the money coming from? E7, we were told, is what do you call it? A landfill account. E7. It's a landfill account, and basically they say they have a $5.9 million in that account that they can take money out and they can purchase all this equipment. But that E7 is not a funding account for anything except building a landfill cell, maintaining a landfill cell, and closing a landfill cell. That's the terms on it. It's not for purchasing outside machinery and all that. But we still haven't got an answer to that question. When did City Council approve all this kind of stuff?
Mr. Eichel, your time for presentation is up. Could I have you please start to wrap up?
I finished?
Your time is up, but if you want to say a few words to wrap up, I'll permit that.
Well, all I can tell you is we want a proper investigation on who authorized the landfill cell number 7, and who authorized the depositing of 20,000 tons of ICI for over 8 years, giving them a voluntary program, not mandatory, like they want to dump on us. We want to know. And like we have a compost facility, it's capable of handling 10,000 tons, but it's only yard waste. We also have our own programs that called waste diversion, that the city never mentions how many tons of waste diversion we have. We have the mandatory recycling program. We have yard waste programs. We have backyard composters, which in 91 the people purchases over 12,000 of backyard composters now that should be given credit for waste diversion, but you never hear waste diversion put on residential customers. And this is another thing that we want to have credit for. There's over 10,000 tons of diversion there that we've done, voluntarily, mandatory only on recycling, but the rest is all voluntary. But we don't get credit for that. We say, and Waste Management comes in, City Council says, we got to have a organic program because it deals with the environment. So you give the plan to the Waste Management, tell them to come back with a plan. They come back with a plan, but there's nothing in there talked about residential people, the waste diversion that we do voluntarily. I have a backyard composter ever since 1992. I do not put anything in and I do not want a green bin because I don't put anything in there. I put it in my backyard. I put all my food waste in there, just like the 12,000. They just said that 89 more people bought backyard composters. You haven't looked at that when you're talking with the waste management people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eichel. That's your time.
Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much for coming.
Hope the City Council will listen to a little bit and take some action on the residential people and what we've done with waste diversion. And we don't need a curbside program, not for 6,000 tons of organics.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, questions from council? Are there any other speakers in the audience who would like to speak? All right, seeing none, we will move on to questions from council. Back to you, Councillor Dodick, since you're at my beck and call.
Yes. Thank you. If I can get someone from administration back to the mic. On page 69 of 179 of the package, where it talks about background and prior decisions, it says, based on waste composition studies at the Waste and Recycling Center, about 57% of the materials in the black cart is organics. Is that information, or is that coming from the Tetra Tech study?
That would be information coming from the Tetra Tech study. I believe that one, the 57% came from 2019. And in the Tetra Tech study, you'll see every time we've done one, there's a different number. It ranges between about 38 to 57%.
Okay, there's an Appendix A to the Tetra Tech study that's contained in the package at page 132. It says, general limitations of document. It says the client and any authorized party acknowledges that the professional document is based on limited data and that the conclusions, opinions, and recommendations contained in the professional document are the result of the application of professional judgment to such limited data. They use the word limited data twice in that limitation. Why should I have any confidence in the conclusions based on Appendix A and the limitations contained in there?
I do know that this limitations is a standard form, and they put it in every report.
I appreciate that, but am I to ignore it? It's part of their report, so you may not be able to answer the question, but I obviously have some concern when reference is made to limited data and the limited use that data can be used for, so maybe that's more of a comment than a question. Going on further, and I actually don't have as many questions as many people are thinking. Yeah. Now, at page 71 of 179, and this often appears in reports, and in this particular case, it says a curbside organics program will have a higher capital cost, but it has been fully covered by federal and provincial grants. But I just want to make sure that everyone knows, and you'd agree with me, and I think the treasurer likely will agree or be able to answer that, is that the grants that are referenced, the two grants that covered the capital costs, were from MSI and the Federal Gas Tax Fund. These grants, although they were utilized for the purposes indicated, they weren't limited for that purpose. In other words, there was a host of other purposes they could have been used for. It was a council decision that it be used for that particular purpose. Is that not correct?
Chair to Councillor Dodick, that is correct.
Thank you. Now, at the page 72 of the report, and this one I was really curious about, it says, however, what would be important to note is that once the 3 curbside programs have been implemented, it is possible to move to a pay-as-you-throw service model. The WRU will work with a consultant to determine the options that are available to the City of Lethbridge residents and report back to Council. Sort of in a nutshell, what are we talking about there? Pay-as-you-throw service.
A pay-as-you-throw is a service based on the amount of waste that you have, and there are many different models that you could have for this type of system. Some models, it's every time you tip, you get charged for that, or it could be the different sizes of bins. As part of our waste management master plan, we're having an assessment done on which model would best serve Lethbridge and would work well within our system, so that people can, the way they throw out their waste will be billed accordingly. It won't be just a flat fee across the board.
Okay, well, that begs the question then that a lot of people have talked about opt-in, opt-out. This seems to be almost a limited form of opt-in, opt-out. So, for example, if people weren't using the black bins for so much, they could be charged less for what they're throwing away. People that don't use the blue bins at all wouldn't be charged if they're not recycling or putting anything in the recycling. And people that are using the green bins, depending on what they put in there or don't put in there, isn't this sort of what pay-as-you-throw service is being contemplated here?
Similar to that, but there'd be kind of a base operating fee similar to your other utilities that would need to be there to run the programs.
Okay, but presumably, if there was a base fee and if you're actually charging people if they throw away more, then presumably some people would be paying less as a total and some people would be paying more.
Absolutely.
I see that Mr. Sanchez has something to add to this as well.
Just want to make sure we mention as well, pay-as-you-throw is one of the models, and Councillor Dodick has a good point. This model will mean that some people can pay more or less depending on their behavior, but we also need to consider that there is a fixed cost for the utility, regardless. Like Mandy had, one option is if you put the bin out, we will charge only by the times that you have the bin out. That's one of the models. The problem is you still have to drive by every house to make sure that the bin is not out, right? And that fixed cost in gas, time for the staff, equipment use has to be recovered. So that's where the consulting or the work that Mrs. Parker mentioned before will be done as part of the Waste Management Master Plan, will allow us to look at all these options and see which one is the best option for the residents. But again, definitely, if I think about Red Deer, the city of Red Deer, they have a model of pay-as-you-throw where they have 2 car sizes, and if you get the big car, you pay more. It's almost double of what you pay with the small car. And there are other options that we want to make sure we explore and we bring the best approach for the residents.
I guess part of the question was, it seems to be that we're having this discussion sort of after the fact, after, as the way the report put it, is after all three, black, green, and blue have been implemented. I was curious, well, no, you weren't here, Mr. Sanchez, but why was that not a consideration when the black bin was introduced or the blue bin was introduced? Or do you know the answer to that? That, you know, I'm not going to put you on the spot. You weren't here.
Yeah,
So
no,
that could be a rhetorical question too.
I think I have an answer for that. I actually talked to the previous manager of waste and recycling, and we got a little bit of the history. The reason why pay-as-you-throw has not been done before is because, again, if council, just to give a little bit of the history, council remembers the proposal originally was to do a green card first, because the majority of the materials are organics. And in order for you to move to a bi-weekly garbage service, we wanted to make sure we remove that organics material from the black card. And that was option number one. Option number two was to implement a blue card program, and option number three was to stay status quo. The decision back in the day from council was to approve the blue card, which means the garbage was now being moved to a bi-weekly schedule, and that generated all the complaints and all the issues with odors and smell, because the organics are now there sitting on the black card. With the intent of having the green card now is that your black card is going to be big enough, more than enough for what you need, and this is the right opportunity to offer the small size, so residents will have, they can have the small card, and they will pay probably, I will say, at least half of what they pay for the big card. So that's why it wasn't introduced before. Typically, all the municipalities, they have all the three cards before you implement a pay-as-you-throw. There is another consideration back in the day. They know it was tried to use a system to do only by pickup, but one of the issues, as you know, Lethbridge is very windy. On a wind day, we can have 4 cards sitting in a corner. Residents will get those, and then we lose the control of who is the owner. So again, the work that Mandy and her team are going to be doing on the next month is to make sure we look at all these factors and bring the best proposal for pay-as-you-throw, and then have that implemented once we have the 3 cards in place.
Mr. Sanchez, since you've had some discussions with prior folks that were involved in this, I recall when the green bin discussions were going on, and a question was posed to the Director of Infrastructure Services at that time specifically, was that in a 15-year lifespan of a cell, if you had a complete diversion with respect to recyclables, the green bin, that would actually add to the life of that cell by 6 months. Does that accord with what you know about that?
So it all depends on what stream are we talking about. If we only talk about the residential only.
Yeah, I'm sorry, residential.
Yes.
I was not dealing with industrial and commercial.
Yeah, that number could be anywhere from 6 months to a year. You're right. In that particular item. That's where, again, we have to remember we're doing this strategy not only for the residential, the waste diversion strategy is for both, the ICI and the residential. The ICI has been doing this for 5 years now, and they are coming into the organics program in 2023 at the same time as the residential. So now when you talk about the ICI capacity, this extension of the landfill cell, we are talking about at least 5 years of life for a cell. So again, that's where the savings, not to mention the leachate management and all the environmental liabilities that we're going to be removing. What we have done in the past, it is in the landfill, nothing we can do right now. But moving forward, we're taking away those organics that generate the leachate and cause all the issues that we are trying to avoid.
I'm not going to dispute you or have an argument about leachate in that, although there does seem to be a divergence of opinion as to what the likelihood of leachate even occurring based on the construction of the material used in landfills at the present time are. That discussion is an ongoing one, isn't it?
And I will say, depend on the landfill that we're talking about. In some areas, when they have a landfill where they take mostly C&D and very little of organics, yes. In our case, I can tell you by facts and numbers that we generate quite a good amount of leachate that we actually recirculate as per the approval. And the intent is to avoid that leachate generation by having less organics materials down the landfill. And that's based, again, in all the studies that we have done in the previous years.
Okay, I'm going to go to the three questions I had that is a response to the official business resolution. When you did, the first question dealt with what would be the cost, capital and operational, to modify the existing regional sites and so on. And page 79 of the report, it talks about the calculation was made on the basis to allow for 7 days a week service at the yard waste site, including staff, equipment, received and prepared materials. Why 7 days per week when curbside recycling won't be 7 days a week per household? So doesn't that create a sort of an artificial high cost, bearing in mind that the actual pickup for an average household is going to be significantly less? Nobody wants to try that one.
I think a lot of that comes down to customer convenience, no different than what's been established with our current yard waste site model. 7 day a week, we're expecting residents to bring it all the way to the sites. We want to make sure that those sites are accessible at the most convenient points of time.
Okay, but if you're picking up organics, for example, every second week, and if you said, okay, we're going to modify the regional sites and we're going to say, well, we're going to allow for 2 days a week for that, then the cost would be significantly less than the calculation made when there's 7 days a week service. Wouldn't that be correct?
If you were to consider it, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Dodick, I'm going to switch over to Councillor Middleton Hope here, who has a question.
Sure.
All right, Councillor Middleton Hope.
Yes. One question in regards to Mr. Eichel's comments earlier. I'd just like to explore the pay-as-you-throw just for a moment. Can I characterize what you've said is that all three will have a base rate? So all three of the bins will have a base rate. However, there may be, and we're not quite there yet because we're exploring options, but there may be an opportunity there to reduce your costs, ergo also reduce the amount of capacity that you provide to the sites. Do I understand that correctly? So if I want to, for the sake of argument, I like going to the recycling and I take all my recycling stuff, I can go to a smaller blue bin, I'm going to pay a base rate on the blue bin, and it will be my overall cost for recycling blue material, I characterize it that way, would be reduced simply because I'm actually not using it. Is that accurate or not?
It is accurate. It just, what that model actually looks like, we're not sure yet. So there will be a reduced cost for the reduced amount that you have.
Okay. And just one other question before I cede the floor back to Councillor Dodick. In regards to the duration, we're talking about, and I'm sure we've had this conversation at some point, but it'll be black bin 1 week, blue bin the next week, green bin the following week? No? I see a head shaking no.
The current plan for the three streams is to continue with bi-weekly service for black and blue. So you would have black 1 week, blue the next, and then your weekly service for green moving forward, and then bi-weekly in the winter months.
Sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
So organics collection, we're going to have a seasonal shift. So we are going to have weekly collection. The plan right now is to have weekly collection from April until the end of October. And then November until April would be bi-weekly service, understanding that yard waste needs are lower during the winter months, so therefore we don't need weekly service.
Okay, good, thank you.
Back to you, Councillor Dodick.
I apologize if I'm offending any of my council colleagues with asking so many questions. When you go to page 84 of 179 of the yard waste stations option, in the middle of the page it says, after the implementation of the curbside recycling program, the recycling material diversion increased 3 times compared to the diversion achieved at the recycling stations. Now, If I recall correctly, the recycling stations had only been in operation for about 3 or 4 years at most, and the participation rate as far as residential consumers was rising. So by the time that the blue bins were introduced, wouldn't it be fair to say if you had a voluntary green bin recycling program, or rather organic program at the recycling centers, that would also start probably the same way as the blue bin buy-in or the recyclable buy-in, and then increased over a period of time? Wouldn't that make sense?
I know we did have the centralized recycling previously. Before we moved to the depot model, there were 7 of them. And in the last recycle depot that was built was 2017. Joel, I'm not sure when the North and West was built. But
The first 2 were built in 2013. So they were in place. 2013 was when they started the building, and they finished in 2014, if I remember correctly. So they were in place for 5 years before we introduced the blue card.
If you go on to page 85, that has the self-haul versus curbside cost and impacts analysis. You had calculated in there a self-haul cost based on 416 kilometers per year for the residents, costing them about $5 a month. Now, was that assumption based on doing the organic drop-off at these centers as a dedicated trip, as opposed to part of, for example, going to the grocery store, going shopping for something else? So was this number a dedicated trip going from home to there and back?
Can probably chip in a little bit on this. This was back in my days when I was in Waste and Recycling working with the team. So we talk a little bit about that fact. So if you go to page 83, it actually has the possible scenarios that we consider. So we're using scenario number 1, where there is only 1 visit a week, because we were aware that some people are going to be going to the grocery store to do any other shopping, and they go to the site, so they use the same opportunity. So we say, well, let's assume that if they only do 1 visit that is dedicated for the food waste in this case. And the main reason is most of the people are not going to keep the food waste in their home for more than a week, so they might need to do multiple visits. This model is based in this assumption: 1 visit a week and 4 kilometers distance between their residence and the yardway sites, or the sites where we're going to be doing the collection. And that's what triggers the rest of the model here. We use different models, and the vehicle that we use was based on Energy Canada and the fuel consumption that they have for a mid-sized vehicle. And that's what triggered all the costs for how much gas they were going to use, how much. The number here in this case, this was done quite a few months ago. If you use the gas price right now, this number is going to be at least another 30% higher than what it is right now. So those were the basic assumptions. We know that, again, these are assumptions. It could vary, it could go up, could go down, and thus we try to do the best of with what we have.
So that's where I was heading. You basically answered the question. Depending on the assumptions you use, the cost will either go up or down.
Definitely. We try to be very conservative, and that's where you see only 1 dedicated visit, not more than 1, because in theory we know that people are going to be going to the sites at least 3 times a week.
Okay, going to the second question on the chart, it talks about the carts and bins, and on the right-hand side, could be repurposed. It says assets could be repurposed but may require additional expenses. I'm not sure if you've got these green bins, could they not be used, for example, as a blue bin or as a black bin as a replacement? So I'm curious, what does that may require additional expenses mean? If you're using it for garbage collection,
we have assets already in place for existing garbage, waste and recycling collection. If we have these trucks, which are already being procured, we're already going to receive them, we can certainly utilize them, but it's either a sale of existing assets, which there would be a loss in the sale of those assets, or we would keep them on and we wouldn't utilize them to their full potential, which we're always looking for full asset utilization.
Okay, and going to the last question, what impact, financial or otherwise, would there be to the city if the currently approved Greenside program was to be reapproved from the CIP? Would that basically be, in terms of the capital side, is most of the capital has been already spent, but a lot of the material, whether it be the equipment or the carts, could be repurposed?
That's correct on the cart front. We've only spent $169,000 on our phase 1 carts. We can pull out from the carts if we were to give them notice. There would be a slightly higher cost per cart for any of our black cart replacements, but it is correct that we would be able to recoup those costs.
And I didn't quite understand number 3, it says operating costs. So in answer to that question, what impact? It says 5 FTEs, 425,000. Are you saying that that would be reduced from the operating costs?
Yeah, that is correct. We would not need at 5 FTEs to run the side loads and rear loads required for curbside collection. The 4 seasonal staff, speaking to Councillor John Middleton Hopes, the seasonal kind of changes that we would expect within the curbside organics program. Fleet costs, we have fixed rate costs and we have variable rate costs. We would not have the variable rate costs for these particular trucks. And the life cycle costs, just speaking to the additional cost of purchasing black and blue carts when we are not purchasing at scale.
Okay, and my final question is, at page 145, you said the landfill fee was decreased in 2022 as a result of larger lifespan of cells and associated reduction in construction costs. This fee will need to be reviewed and could result in an increase for residential utility fees. How does that tie into the response to the question? So I'm trying to see how that works.
I can explain that one again. We did this change back in 2019, if memory serves. We came back to council and we decreased the cost of E7 from, again, I'm gonna speak from the top of my mind, 21 million, I believe, down to $17 million, or close to 17 and a half. And the main reason why we were doing that is because as a result of the waste diversion strategy, both from the ICI and the residential, we were reducing the amount of materials that we were sending to the cells at the landfill. And some material were now being transferred to either be recycled, reprocessed, etc. So there was an opportunity to extend the time frame that we were going to build another cell. If we decide to stop this and the program, again, as we mentioned before, the cell will have somewhere between 6 months to a year less of less life for that cell, only for the residential, and if there is any implication for the ICI as well, that means that it could be even longer. So we just want to make sure we explain that we might need to build that cell a little bit sooner than what we originally expected. Instead of, just to put a number, 2029, it could be in 2027 or 2026, depending on the landfill use.
Mr. Sanchez, if the green bin program had not been approved a number of years ago, the capital cost and the operating costs that we're now talking about wouldn't have been incurred at all, would they?
You are correct.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dodek. Does anybody else have any questions right now, other than me? All right. A few questions from me. When we're looking at the compost, do we have a purchaser lined up for our compost? And what's the potential for revenue generation there?
So we have purchasers lined up for our existing compost. So we've been producing compost for a number of years from our yard waste composting, and we do sell that actively in the market. The current rate is $25 a metric ton for that compost. After we start to produce a new compost product from a new process and new feedstocks, we'll seek to market that material, but it is difficult to market that material before you know the characteristics of it. well. So first we will make some of that compost, and this was the case with our yard waste as well. We'll generate a product that we can test and provide information on to potential customers, and then we will seek to market that product after that.
How much are we taking in right now with what we currently sell?
Are you at
How much are we currently making on our current compost sales?
It's $25 a metric ton. We've probably, I don't have the numbers at the top of my fingertips. We haven't sold a large amount,
Okay.
probably 1,000 or 2,000 tons last year.
Okay. But we would look at marketing it because we have in the past, and we do recognize there is a market for it.
There are markets for compost. Calgary is very successful in marketing theirs, and we would look to learn from Calgary as to what they're doing. And Medicine Hat also markets their compost. So we have some municipal counterparts that we would look to learn from when we needed to market a more large-scale food waste compost.
Okay. Mr. Sanchez, you had something you'd like to add to that?
Yes, just to mention, Mr. Rossi, also back in the day, they have been working with the Lethbridge Research Station and other customers, and the idea is to use this product in local farms. So again, there is a good opportunity to market this, and as Steve mentioned, not only Medicine Hat, Calgary, even Kelowna. We have been talking since they have the same technology that we have in place. And there is always need for this type of products, and that's what we're going to go after and continue working both with the research station and, if possible, the university and the college as well, since they have a program that is applicable to these type of materials.
Very much. When we look at the different options and we talk about having people haul their organics to the yard waste site, we talk. And it's outlined in the options, talking about having to build containments similar to what we see at the landfill. So we'd have to build sort of like mini containment. How long would that take to bring online?
If we were to approve self-haul, there would be some improvements made to the sites. They could probably be made within one construction season after approval.
And sort of following up on that, there's also talk and discussion in there about pest mitigation. What would that look like at those yard waste sites? Like, what kind of pests can we expect? To what extent? What would that mitigation have to look like?
That's a really good question, and collecting the materials in the city would heighten our risk of nuisances, which could involve pests or odors. So it could be things such as flies or wildlife, birds that would be attracted to the food waste. So the mitigations for that would be we would have to have more sensitive mitigations than we have at the Waste and Recycling Center, and that is one of the challenges with an in-town drop-off is that because the neighbors would be closer and they're used to a certain aesthetic around the neighborhood, there could be more acutely noticed impacts. So it may be through engineering controls that we would work with consultants to design, or it may be through the way we operate the sites in terms of, servicing frequently to ensure that nuisances were mitigated through operations. So there's a number of ways we could handle that, but I don't believe we've gone to that level of detailed design yet to know exactly what would be involved.
Okay. Sort of the final question I have along this lines is, if we didn't go with the green bins or move forward with it and stalled this out, would we still be able to move ahead with the pay-as-you-throw?
The best practice is to have all three systems in place to operationalize and make it really efficient. I'm sure there's something that could be done. I just don't know what that is right now, because we've always been talking about the three streams and having those matured and then move to the pay-as-you-throw system.
And I see, Mr. Sanchez, you have something to add to that?
Just to, again, add another example of another community that has a program where they do actually have seasonal program for the organics. It's Medicine Hat. It's a voluntary program. They don't require this. This is not mandatory. And last time we met with them, they struggle because the participation, again, is only 20-25%. And they are not able to recover the full cost. And that's where they are also moving forward with a green card, because that's the only way they can apply the pay-as-you-throw. We have to remember that not everybody will participate. So for those residents that decide not to participate, they will need to have the big black card, because the materials that they generate is going to be enough to fill that car, and then they will be paying the most expensive option. And again, that will go together with the diversion strategy that we have in place.
Thank you very much. I see I have Councillor Carlson in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple quick questions, if I can. When you were looking at these two options, what other communities did you have to compare to who do this self-haul somewhere in a community, haul it to there and drop off? How many communities did you have to look at that implemented something like this?
I'm aware of Saskatoon, I believe, had the self-haul, but they are moving towards the mandatory curbside program at this time.
So there actually was one. Interesting. I didn't think there would have been any. But they're finding apparently some challenges and moving to the curbside. Is that what I heard?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr.
Thank you.
Sanchez, Mr. Sanchez, you had something to add?
Yes, I just want to say that Mr. Nicol has a little bit more of information on that one that he can share with council.
So Saskatoon has a voluntary system similar to what was discussed with Medicine Hat. Theirs is a year-round program, and they are actually in the process of moving to a fully implemented curbside organics collection as well. A couple of municipalities, there are not many to look to for an option like this. Some of the only ones that do have this are areas where pests are of the larger variety. So Banff, Canmore, where you can't have a curbside option due to significant risks. The study of other municipalities, this is not a common option.
Thank you for that. On the other side, the curbside collection, pardon me, seems like you named several communities that have currently gone to curbside organics. Is that the vast majority of municipalities? I get lots of interaction with people who've moved to Lethbridge, and it seems no matter where they come from, they have the 3 bin options in their previous community, and they're curious why we don't. So are there lots of communities out there still that haven't implemented curbside options?
There are several municipalities that haven't implemented or have a voluntary program right now, but the general trend is moving towards, again, Regina is moving towards a curbside organics program starting in 2023. We'll likely be competing with cart delivery with them, actually. Saskatoon, as mentioned before, is moving towards full implementation from what they used to do, which was a voluntary program. We're seeing Edmonton move towards curbside collection of organic materials. And then, Calgary, Red Deer, most other municipalities in Western Canada already have a well-established organics collection program.
Okay, so we do have lots of comparators and people to learn from on this. Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you. Just to follow up to that question is, of all these communities, has any community ever reversed their decision? Because we're kind of behind my colleague here said Edmonton or someone's been doing it 20 years, or some of these communities have been doing it for 20 years. Has any community said, you know what, this was not a good move, we got to reverse this and kind of get out of this? Can you recall?
No, not in the scans that we've done. If anything, I would speak to the recycling side in the United States. If anything, I've seen it reverse there, but that's usually for market issues, not for the actual collection issues themselves. But organics, no.
Second question is, I'm just trying to think how often I would use my kids eat a lot and they eat all their food up, so I'm just trying to think of what food waste I have. I'm trying to think, I would use it a lot during the summertime. Yard waste, mowing your grass, if you don't mulch your grass and all that. Is there an opportunity, if we looked at the option of someone maybe saying for 6 months a year, I want to use it. From what I heard, there's certain times of the year where there's not a lot. Have we looked at different options, like 6 months of the year you're going to be charged for this, and then during the winter time, have we looked at those options? Or is that not even on the radar right now?
I think we haven't looked into that option. Nobody else has done it. Again, as I mentioned before, you have a fixed cost that you have to recover, right? And that's where the best example that I can give you is City of Calgary. They originally started doing this collection on a weekly basis year-round. And then they realize what you say. They say, well, the cars are not full every week during the winter time. And a couple of years ago, they went back and they actually introduced this seasonal model. And that's where we have been talking to Calgary, I believe, has a green card for now 7-8 years. Red Deer, when they implemented 3 years ago, they went straight to the seasonal model. And again, after talking to all of them, that's what we decided was the only way to keep the cost down is only to have the cars there when we need it. And it's during the summertime. During the winter time, it's bi-weekly. The other thing that we did with the implementation is we're not going with a 360. If you see the cards that we're giving to the residents for the green card, it's a 240, which is significantly smaller than the 360. Again, we could go with a 120, but the problem here, the 120 is the wind. Those cards are going to be flying all over the place. So that's where we didn't go to that option. We kept the 240.
So what the good news is, us being late to the party, we've learned a lot from what other communities have done and learned where they made their mistakes and all that kind of stuff, which is the good news. The biggest concern, and this is not so much a question, it's more of a concern I get from the community in regards to, is not everyone has the luxury to having a garage to store these things. So it's another bin that they have to manage. And I know you guys can't control that and all that, but that's the biggest issue. I just wanted to let it be out there. A lot of people, it's not so much the cost, it's just another bin that they have to manage. But of course, I remember when we brought in the Tarlic tubs, and that was a big issue. And then of course, I guess we get used to it, but that's one issue. I just want to let you guys know, that's one thing I do here is, and now they have to manage another tub. So thank you.
Councillor Middleton Hope.
Just one last question on mitigating the use of the bins and so forth. Have you contemplated an amnesty program whereby the residents will be able to downsize from a larger cart to a smaller cart? I understand there is a cost associated with that currently, but if in the future we move towards reducing the size of our carts for whatever reason, have you contemplated an amnesty program whereby we may have, forgiveness for 6 months or something of that nature?
As part of the rollout of the Curbside Organics program, we want people to try out the bin size that they're given, and then we will have some days, just like we did for the Blue Cart, where you can change the size of your bin without cost.
Will we be able to reduce the size of all of the sizes of our bins? Because the dynamics of the waste, whether it's the green waste or the blue or the black, that may change with the new organic rollout. So I may say, I'm just not using as much of the blue bins, but I also know now that I'm only paying, say for the sake of argument, $6 a month for the recycling. I like going to the recycling bin, so I'm going to take more of my waste there. I can reduce the size of my cart. So that's sort of being contemplated in this process?
Right now, we have a few options for the sizes of the bins that we do have, but that will be part of the pay-as-you-throw model, where we'll roll out something, and the differential between the sizes of the bins, if that is how we go through with that, that is where the reward would be for using a smaller bin, is the differential. Again, not sure what that looks like, but there will be that opportunity. And for people to change their cart size, initially, there would be some sort of program set up so that you don't have to pay for the downsize or changing of your cart size.
Thank you.
And Councillor Palladino.
Madam Chair, this is an interesting conversation, and it's got some questions. My question revolves around the costs of modifying the existing 3 sites, and not just the financial costs so much as the costs of rezoning and approval by a regulator. I'm assuming the approval by the regulator is Alberta Environment?
Yes, and it's notification, so it's not a full approval. It would just be notification.
Right, and so when we started talking about neighborhood concerns regarding pest control and birds and leachate collection, if that falls under Alberta Environment, is that defined as a landfill, then this is a moot point because we know you have to have a 300-meter separation to a residence for a landfill, but we're getting awful close to that definition, aren't we?
Probably be more of a transfer station instead of a landfill. There wouldn't be a 300-meter setback.
Would Alberta Environment have some sort of separation distance from residential, I would think, or the city should have some sort of separation distance?
The separation distance that you're referring to from a landfill does not apply to this facility, similar as it doesn't apply to it in its current use as a yard waste site. So there would be some concerns from the city of Lethbridge as a zoning agency that they may require us to do certain things as part of that process through the zoning, the planning and design department. But there is a regulatory notification to Alberta Environment to make sure that all of the necessary things to protect the environment are done at this site as well.
My second question, did I read somewhere in there that the trucks and bins or the contracts have been signed already for the production of these?
That is correct for both.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any other questions from members of council on this item? All right, seeing none,
Yep.
I have, oh,
Madam Chair,
sorry, Councillor Carlson, go ahead.
No worries. I was just wondering if we had anyone, Mr. Sanchez or city manager or designate, wants to try and address. I tried to jot down when Mr. Eichel was speaking his questions. And the only one I could kind of figure out where he was asking was on this E7. And I think I understand. Council approved E7 as part of, I believe, our capital budget. And that created the overall budget for curbside organics. And that is where all these purchases are coming out of. But I may be wrong. And it seems that Mr. Eichel didn't understand it and would like someone to explain to him how that approval came about. I believe it was during the CIP, and how those expenditures are coming out of that budget. Can someone try to tackle that for me?
Yeah, sure. I can explain that the questions that Mr. Eichel had. We had a meeting with Mr. Eichel and the previous city manager last year, as he mentioned, and we went through the CAP process. There is something here to mention as well, is that in the previous CAP, this CAP, we're working on the ICI sector and the residential sector. So these are two separate CAP projects. One of them started in the previous cycle, and the name of that project was E7 for the CAP process, but the project number was a different project number. When the new CAP process was approved, E7, the name of E7 was given to the curbside organics, and what used to be E7 in the past is now E8. So again, that generated some confusion that we explained to Mr. Eichel, and we were trying to make sure he knew that these are two separate projects. E7 for the 2022-2031 CAP is the curbside organics for the residents, and E7 from the 2018 to 2029, I believe it is for the ICI sector. Going back to your question in terms of how council approved these projects, typically city council approved the project as an amount that includes different type of purchases. I'm gonna give you an example. When we did the recycling project, we got approval to build the MRF, to build all the equipment, the trucks, plus the carts. That approval is for the whole project. Typically, administration don't come back to council every time we buy each one of the components for that project. What we do, though, is there is a procurement report that is being presented to city council, I believe it's every month, if I'm not mistaken. And that report has a breakdown of all the items and different type of equipments that we're buying for each one of the project and where the funding is coming from. And that's what we try to explain to Mr. Eichel, is that council approved the CAP project, and then administration goes ahead and they do the procurement of those assets, and then report those procurements as they happen through a competitive process, which is what happened for this particular equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. That was my understanding, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that there wasn't any, well, I won't characterize it, but it's very similar to a building project. When we approve, say, the NMAX renovation, that is for the NMAX renovation. And every time they buy a window or a door, it doesn't come for council's approval unless it's going over budget or there are issues. So I just wanted to try and get some clarity there. So thank you for that, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from council? All right, seeing that we have none, I do have a motion here from Councillor Palladino. Be it resolved that the Economic Standing Policy Committee recommends that council receive the information for the Curbside Organics Program Yard Waste Stations Option Report. Councillor Palladino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had a pretty robust discussion on this, so if my colleagues have no further questions or comments or debate, I will call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? And that carries. All right, moving on to item 6.2. Again, another submission with regards to the toxic e-waste eco drop-off. Do any members of council have any questions with regards to this at all? Councillor Parker.
I appreciate this. I brought this as a resolution, or OBM, November of last year. So my question is, there's three options here, and one has quite a capital cost, and I can understand why administration is not recommending it. Number three being leave as is. People have to drive all the way out to the Waste and Recycling Center, which is quite a distance for most people in the community. And then option number two, could you just, I know there's these toxic yeast roundups once or twice a year. Could you just maybe partner with the partners that usually provide it and just say, we have these three sites that we as a city are willing to donate location-wise, so there's no cost? Or is there still going to be a cost no matter what? Like, I know it's 6 cents per household, and still it's a cost, but was there a way of just saying, hey, whatever DBS, whatever it is, local firm, here's our facilities, we're more than welcome to host you guys, to have it happen. You guys bring your staff, volunteers. Did you guys look at that option at all?
There is a cost for those kind of collections that you would pay. If you took it to DBS, you would be paying a similar type of fee for the disposal. So it's the disposal fee and the handling of that needs to be collected. So what would typically happen is we would procure a company, a contractor, to do this for us and handle that material and then take it away to the correct locations where they need to be.
So when you hear about those ones, like these free drop-offs throughout the year, there's actually a cost. And
there is a cost, and it depends, like e-waste. I know they use that as a fundraiser for many 4-H clubs or scouts, and they can collect that and they can return that and get funding for that. Do you want to?
Yeah, I would just like to add to that. Yeah, I believe e-waste only. The potential for a lower cost option may exist, but we understood the OBM to be looking at toxic and e-waste, so that may be possible.
Those ones I hear, I always kind of categorize them all. I said those are e-waste. No one really volunteers to have a toxic roundup in this city. Am I correct?
I'm not aware of one.
Thank you. I just way to mix up. Okay, thank you very much. I always thought it was called again.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Ms. Parker, if I can. I believe it'll be Ms. Parker or Mr. Rossi to answer this. Help me out here. It said utility cost increase, and Councillor Parker was correct. It said 6 cents. But then I thought I read further down that it could be no cost. So I was confused.
We would do the pilot for 1 year at no cost and absorb that into what we're doing right now. But then if this is a program that is decided to be added as a service on an annual basis, then there would be a utility rate increase.
I guess I'm wondering why we could run it for a pilot, because it'll be funded from the cost savings of the disposal rate, I'm guessing. But if that's an ongoing savings, would it not be cost neutral forever?
I'm not.
So if if I can explain a little bit, it's not 6 cents, the cost. We're doing this as a pilot is because we want to make sure we know it's going to be well used and the residents are going to participate on a regular basis. We're doing 3 events. The cost that we have in the report, I believe, is not even 1 cent. It's 0.06 cents per dwelling unit per month. So it's a minimum cost, but if the program after the pilot is very successful and we get residents going and attend these events regularly, we can even go for more than 3. We can do 8 a year. We can do whatever depending on the needs, and that will be the cost in order to offer for those. This cost is for 3 events. If we need to do 6 events, the cost will be 1 cent per dwelling unit per month.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I had a further question, but I didn't write it down, so I'll hop out unless there's others.
So anybody else have any further questions to this item? Councillor Parker?
We're going to be doing a pilot project, and do you have measurables that you define as success? Or is that we as the elected officials, hey, that was a really good idea, and then we kind of get back to you folks, or like that's how
I don't believe we actually have built like a performance expectation, but obviously the success indicators would be participation. So I would think we would collect information on trips or participation by residents. We would look at the various areas of the city that participated and then have information on the units and tons of material that was diverted and report that back to council and compare that to our existing programs. And I think at that point we could have a discussion on whether that was successful and something that was wanted to be carried on.
What interesting statistic I would like to see would be, obviously you have a measurable how much goes out to the waste and recycling center, which is like 10 kilometers outside the city. I have to emphasize that, it's a long drive for people, 10 kilometers. And so if you have a number, let's say so many tons, and then when this pilot project, if it's like tripled how much stuff has been brought in, that's a really good sign. And obviously that much less cars on the road driving out there and doing all that. So it'll be interesting to see, but if it stays the same, it really wasn't worth it because they would have went out there anyway. So I'm expecting there'll be a huge increase. So I'm optimistic.
Mr. Sanchez, you had something to add?
You're right on, Councillor Parker. That was what I was going to suggest. We know how much we get at the site today at the Waste and Recycling Center, so that comparison will be good. The other number too that we could use to check is the waste audits that have been done by the consultant and led by Allison Rax. We know what is the amount of the percentage of these type of materials in the black car today. So hopefully that number will be going down as well, because now there is an option in town. And people they are not going to be putting that on the black car. They have an opportunity to do it within city limits.
Does anybody else have any further questions to this item? All right, I don't see any other questions. I have a resolution here from Councillor Carlson. Be it resolved that the Economic Standing Policy Committee recommends that Council, 1, to implement a pilot program for up to three toxic e-waste roundups, drop-off events for residents within city limits. 2, after the 1-year pilot program, administration will report back to council with the outcomes of the pilot and make the appropriate recommendations in terms of operational budget requirements if needed. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one further question, if I could.
Yep.
I remembered it now. When could this be implemented if council approves it?
I believe it could be implemented in a very short time frame. Probably we could have roundups within a matter of a few months. We would need to do some contracting, so a quick RFP with vendors to select a vendor competitively and ensure that they had availability. But assuming they are available, I think it would be relatively quick.
Excellent. Thank you. If there's nothing further from my colleagues, Madam
We
Chair.
have Councillor Parker has just jumped
Just for
in here.
debate, just for debate.
Just for debate? Okay, yep.
This was a resolution that I brought forward back in November, and it's kind of come full circle now, and I want to thank the administration. Michelle Judge, you were the director at that time, and you heard, the main concern I had was people having to drive so far to throw out one can of paint or the odd monitor or something like that, and I thought a lot of people would be hesitant to drive that far. So if we can make things more convenient, I think this is realistic. It's not something that's going to be year-round and every day. People can work their calendars. They know when these roundups are going to occur, and I think it's a win-win situation. So I thank you for your team's work. Thank you.
Don't see anybody else in for debate. Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Parker took most of my debate. I was going to thank him for bringing this forward. I think if we can do this in a cost-effective manner for convenience to our residents, I am heartily in favor of it, and thank him for bringing it forward, and thank our administration for the work they've done on this and keeping the costs down. I hope I have my colleagues' support. Thank you.
So we'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried. All right, moving on to item 7.1, our confidential items. I have from Councillor Campbell. Be it resolved that the Economic Standing Policy Committee recommend that Council direct that the closed meeting discussions, reports, documents, and attachments with respect to the external organization participation agreements remain confidential pursuant to Section 23, Local Public Body Confidences, 24, Advice from Officials, and 25, Harmful to Economic and Other Interests of a Public Body of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Councillor Campbell.
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? And that carries. Item 7.2 from Councillor Carlson. Be it resolved that the Economic Standing Policy Committee direct that the closed meeting discussions, reports, documents, and attachments with respect to the Lethbridge District Exhibition update remain confidential pursuant to Section 16, Business Interests of a Third Party, 21, Harmful to Intergovernmental Relations, 23, Local Public Body Confidences, 24, Advice from Officials, and 25, Harmful to Economic and Other Interests of a Public Body of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And further be it resolved that the Chair of the Economic SPC, Deputy Mayor Schmidt-Rempel, be authorized to update the Mayor on this item who is absent from the closed meeting. And further be it resolved that the Economic Standing Policy Committee direct administration to proceed with the closed meeting recommendations and return to the June 15th, 2022 Economic Standing Policy Committee meeting. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Chair Schmidt-Rempel. Very speedy reading that was. Unless there's anything further, I'll call for the vote.
Vote's been called. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much, everyone. That is our meeting, and we are adjourned.